Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I hope you've had a good week so far. My name is Lisa. I am your host today for this live chat about the truth about carbs and vegetables. I think this is a really important topic to cover. Before I get into it, though, I am the head coach and owner of Nutrition Coaching and Life. We are a nutrition coaching company where we help others lose fat, build muscle, and just in general improve their body composition, learn more about nutrition and fitness, and just overall have healthier, happier lives. I am here located in Bogota, Colombia at the moment, but I am a digital nomad, so I'm all over the place and I speak to you from wherever during the various weeks. But in this week, I'm coming at you from South America. I want to get right into it. So I hope your October is off to a good start so far and that you are preparing yourself for the holidays already. I was going to mention as well that I've created a happy, healthy holiday handbook. If you are interested in it, simply let me know in the comments and I will send it to you for free so you can navigate the holidays successfully and stay on track and not gain any weight, stay in your routine with all your habits and everything else. All right, let's talk about the truth about vegetables and carbs and why I even want to mention this as a topic. Well, I think there are so many controversies out there about vegetables and carbs, mainly because of keto and carnivore at the moment. And I think it's kind of crazy that we even are having these debates because I don't know, 40, 50, however many years ago, it was always like, eat your vegetables, or probably you and I as kids growing up, eat your vegetables. So how come there is, that notion out there that vegetables and carbs, I get a little bit more in the sense of, oh, they might be fattening or whatever. But vegetables, how are we discussing that they are unhealthy? Well, from my read of the literature, from what I have learned in all my bachelor, master's studies, my certifications, from how I have continued to educate myself about macronutrients, healthy nutrition, etc., over the last few years, the literature, the consensus is pretty clear that vegetables are high in micronutrients, so vitamins, minerals, and are therefore quite conducive to positive health outcomes and are linked with a longer lifespan, are linked with many things like better gut health, with many things like just in general better digestion or just overall feeling more energized. So I am going to always continue to recommend eating vegetables to my clients. However, I do think there are certain situations where cutting vegetables out or cutting certain vegetables out for some time is beneficial. And I will get more into that in a little while. But for now, I think I just want to preface that I personally know or read from the literature that vegetables are good for you and you should continue to consume them. So some of the claims that are being made, for example, are that the pectins, etc., in there could be carcinogenic, that the broccoli, certain compounds in broccoli or cruciferous vegetables could lead to lower iron levels, that specific things in there are leaking into your bloodstream and therefore from the gut into your bloodstream and therefore are sort of allergenic, I guess, for some people. And yeah, like the claims are numerous out there. We really can't there's no end to any kind of crazy claims. I think what we are asking ourselves, or what we have to ask ourselves, is what are we aiming for? Are we aiming for optimal nutrition? Are we aiming for what we can get away with? And I think when we're looking at things that we can get away with, it often doesn't become apparent until several years down the road. So I know many people that turned vegan and they felt amazing the first few years or months at least, and then suddenly all the deficiencies started showing up because they weren't looking after their vitamin B, after their iron, after enough protein. So not saying that you can't be vegan and be healthy, but you do need to make sure that you're not getting any deficiencies. And likewise, if you're cutting out all this fiber, all these vegetables, all these greens in particular, greens are like the best kind of vegetables because on average, you get the most amount of micronutrients for the amount of calories that they provide. So I'm huge on vegetables, especially green ones. But yeah, if you're suddenly cutting them out, you might feel good in terms of digestion. You might still feel energized. But what happens a few years down the road? Like even if you are eating a lot of micronutrients through things like organ meats or liver or eggs or other things like that, we don't. I think we really don't know yet how detrimental that could be. So I'm going to continue to eat and to recommend eating vegetables. I personally recommend eating at least 500 grams of vegetables and fruit combined per day. That is the government recommendation. Not that I usually put a lot of emphasis on recommendations that the government provides for food. But overall, I think that's a really good place to aim for if you have like 100 grams of berries in your breakfast, if you have 200 grams of vegetables in your lunch, if you have 100 grams of some kind of fruit in your afternoon snack, and maybe another 100 grams of vegetables in your dinner. You're setting yourself up for something manageable, long-term, and that is really going to cover a lot of micronutrients for you. You might argue, okay, what if I take supplements? Well, supplements are awesome. I love certain supplements to help optimize things even more. But I do think that the micronutrients that we get from vegetables, that we get from actual foods, are absorbed and processed differently or even more potently by the body. That is my opinion. And aside from that, vegetables are filling, the fiber in them is also, according to the literature, linked to a lot of positive health outcomes aside from just being able to poop better or whatever. The fiber is linked with better blood sugar, better blood sugar control, better cholesterol levels, better heart health overall. So I am also going to continue to be an advocate for fiber, also because I do know that it is satiating and it helps our clients go through their diets in a really successful way by just simply being less hungry. For example, I have had a client just recently where she said, I really only have 12, 16 weeks to get this amount of weight off. I like being flexible aside from that out the rest of the year. But I'm really, really struggling to adhere to my current calories. I want to make this work. How can I feel more satiated? And I looked through her food log, and first of all, she was eating out a lot, so estimating a lot and a lot of oils and stuff like that, which are kind of a waste of calories, but in my opinion, in that way, or at least it doesn't satiate us as much. But more importantly, she wasn't consuming enough fiber, or some of the fiber she was getting was like from her bread or from her protein bar or so. So switching to actually fibrous foods like potatoes, like chia seeds, like broccoli, like berries, and so on, it made a huge difference for her. And she was able to adhere no worries at all until the end of her dieting phase. We're currently in the middle of her reverse diet where she's still super, super adherent. So yes, I think the biggest thing that we have to consider when it comes to vegetables is that there are interpersonal variations depending on your own genetics and digestive tract. And not even just that, but also depending on your current life stressors, because we do know that when someone is stressed, the digestion doesn't function quite as well as when you are in a more of a relaxed state. So if you have a really, really high stress life, chances are that you are more prone to things like leaky gut, or that you're more prone to things like irritable bowel syndrome. So automatically you're not going to process things like cabbage, like beans and so on, as well as if you were in a super, super relaxed state. So just considering that, if you have responded not ideally to a certain food at some point in time, it does not mean that you're always going to be intolerant to that. And the second point to that is also that you're not necessarily going to be intolerant to that in all forms. So let's just say when it comes to beans, you might not be fine with beans that are only a little bit cooked, but you might do a lot better with them if they've been soaked for a longer amount of time, or if they have been sprouted, or if they have been mashed with other things. So it really, really depends. Same thing with cruciferous vegetables. A lot of people say like, oh, broccoli makes me bloated, makes me gassy, and so on. Has it been cooked properly? We don't like raw vegetables are a lot harder to digest than cooked vegetables. So that's something to consider. And some people, even if they are more sensitive to FODMAPs, they might be fine with a little handful of broccoli florets, but not so much with the stem, or they might not be fine with twice the amount. So it really, really, really is person dependent. Some people most definitely should follow or are going to feel better on a low FODMAP diet. That still includes vegetables, though. Some people might not tolerate nightshades. Some people might want to watch their fiber intake and just making sure that it doesn't get too high and they feel best at 20 grams rather than 40. Some people do need to just navigate their SIBO or irritable bowel syndrome differently according to day or week or however they're feeling. So we can't give a recommendation of like, oh, you should never eat beans, you should never eat bananas, you should never eat cruciferous vegetables. So all in all, I think the more vegetables we can incorporate, the more satiated we are going to feel. There is definitely a cap to that. I personally work with a lot of women that love eating healthy, and often they actually come to us with indigestion or just with feeling lack of energy. And so sometimes it might be switching some of those non-starchy carbs, so some of the vegetables, for actual carbs. And that brings me to the second point of carbs, of this whole entire live here, where I want to talk about the truth about carbs. I want to share with you that I used to be terrified of carbs. I had a teacher in university. She was very much pro low carb diets, and there are a lot of benefits to low carb diets. I will get into some of those later on. But that was really for me the first sort of seed planted for you should cut down your carbs. So I started cutting down carbs a little bit there, and then of course that was made even worse by things like the paleo diet and stuff like that coming into play, where it was like, oh, no refined carbs at all, or no rice, you can't have any grains whatsoever. And so by the end of that, I was like terrified of even just eating fruit, because I thought carbs per se are terrible. I did not understand the concept of energy balance. I did not understand the concept of how carbs are being processed in the body and how they might be very useful as well. So I would say, yes, carbs are a non-essential macronutrient. That means our body doesn't need them in order to function. We do need proteins in order to survive. We do need fats in order to survive for our hormone regulation and everything else. We don't need carbs. However, are we going to potentially feel a lot better and live a more optimal life with higher performance on carbs? Very likely, in my opinion. Are there certain individuals that are thriving on keto or no carb or low carb diets? Absolutely. I am not one of them. And from working with hundreds of people, I will say that maybe 2 to 5% would be okay with no or very low carbs. And the rest of the people benefit from including some carbs. In the right measure, it can be absolutely awesome for your physical and cognitive performance, because our brain functions best on like fast digesting carbs or like glycogen essentially. So the thing where the culprit comes in is it needs to be used in the right measure and the right kind. And that's where we have over the last decades gone wrong, because we have unfortunately been consuming not enough protein, not enough healthy fats, and not enough healthy carbs. We have processed the carbs too much, and we have added too many processed fats to that as well. And that's what we've been mostly relying on, even though we have been less active. So my recommendation would be, in order to benefit from carbs, to include some carbs, to include them at the right time for you. So if you're someone who is sedentary all day long, it might be a matter of like keeping your day, your breakfast, your lunch, and your snacks kind of lower carb. Unless you have like a really important presentation to give, or you feel super, super drained at some point. But essentially, you're probably going to keep your energy levels more steady throughout the day if you're mostly consuming vegetables, protein, and healthy fats throughout the day, and then a carb heavier meal in your dinner or for your dessert, in order to help your body deal with stress, because that's one of the main benefits that carbs really, really, really shine at, a lot more than fats or proteins. and on top of that to help you sleep. So for me personally, those two things, have sleep and stress management, have gotten so much better since I have allowed myself to have more carbs, to have learned to incorporate them simply into my calories, and therefore that's also taken away some of the fear. It was a slow process though. So if you are currently quite afraid of carbs, of bread, of rice, of sugary things, my encouragement is to start tracking your food and to learn how to work in carb sources into your day. And you might, what I, for example, found out was like, oh, okay, well, if I have a bowl of cereal for dessert, because most cereals are dessert, are not actually a meal, but for dessert, because I like it, simply because I enjoy it, um, that might be the same amount of calories than if I have some avocado with nuts for dessert or so. So essentially, am I going to get the same amount of micronutrients for one or the other? No, but if we're including something like cereal or some other treat that, or something else that you regard as a treat from time to time, you're not damaging your physique, and most certainly not your performance. I definitely started sleeping better and definitely started performing better, and my relationship with food started to improve right away. If someone is completely sedentary or suffers from any kind of disease like epilepsy or something like that, low carb really can be a decent long-term approach. However, most people, again, are more active. They have some sort of training. If you are a woman in particular who wants to optimize her cycle health, her hormones, her sleep, and ideally also some muscle mass, chances are you are going to benefit from having some starchy carbs in there, and of course also non-starchy carbs. We want to also kind of look into the complex and simple carbs. That is another kind of subtopic of this. It's actually a really big topic. I mean, in general, the whole carb and vegetable thing. But yeah, let's look at simple and complex carbs. Both of them can have a place. Both of them can be delicious. You shouldn't feel guilty for having one or the other. In terms of optimization for your energy levels throughout the day, once again, one has a different place than the other. The simple carbs, as the name says, are processed very quickly, are uptaken by your bloodstream very quickly, especially if consumed on their own without any protein or healthy fats. They're going to spike our blood sugar more quickly, and then it's going to drop more quickly also. That is easily offset by including some protein, some fat in with that meal. So simply lowering the glycemic load of that set item that you're eating. Generally speaking, though, I would mostly bunch my simple carbs around my training or when I don't mind getting quite sleepy afterwards. So if I want to have a bagel from time to time, I might have that as a post-workout snack with a protein shake. It's not ideal, but it's something that brings me joy and that fuels my workout. Or something like white rice, a simple carb, is an amazing pre and post-workout carb source also. In terms of complex carbs, those on the other hand, we kind of want to not have quite as much of immediately around our workouts, because they are processed in a slower manner, and therefore they're going to bring up the blood sugar or our energy levels, or going to simply take a lot more to process by our body than we would like pre-workout or immediately post-workout. So things like more like brown rice and so on, that would be better at different times of the day. Of course, we're talking about like the minute optimization things here. So, don't stress about it too much if your overall calories are completely off and you're not eating enough protein and you're not eating enough vegetables. This should not be something that you're stressing about, but utilizing your complex and your simple carbs at the right time can be quite beneficial for your digestion around your workouts and simply for feeling a steadier energy release throughout the day. As I was alluding to earlier, if you are not very active at all, if you're mostly sedentary, you might benefit from having mostly non-starchy vegetables, proteins, and healthy fats throughout the day. And then in the evening, having more of those starchy carbs, of those carbs that are probably going to make you more tired. If you're someone who has experimented with a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, you might have found some findings shocking, like, oh, I ate this banana for breakfast and suddenly my blood sugar was, I don't know where. Or I even had a client come to me the other day and she said, oh, I've tried or experimented with a CGM and I found out I can't have my oat milk latte in the morning anymore because it's sending my blood sugar through the roof. Well, we have found out that even if she just has a Brazil nut beforehand, it has nowhere near the same effect. So truly, don't get too hung up on a specific number a CGM might have spat out at you once. Really look into it. How did you sleep on that day? Did you have anything prior to whatever you're assessing? Was there any fiber in there? How is your stress level at the moment? Did you have any caffeine with that as well? So there are a lot of aspects to that. And your like one day she might have had this and that reading from her CGM from the oat milk latte, difficult word. And then the next day, she might have had a completely different reading just because she slept better. So yeah, take all of that with a grain of salt for sure. But just to bring it back around, I do think most women are going to benefit from having some carbs in the evening or around their workouts or both. If you're very active, any meal can include carbs essentially because you're going to utilize them a lot better. Training per se, strength training in and of itself helps with better blood sugar regulation. But yes, for optimization, I personally feel better with lower carb meals throughout the day or not as high in simple carbs anyway. Immediately after my training in the morning, I usually have quite a bit of carbs through oats and fruit, and then not quite as much during my lunch and in the afternoon, and then a carb heavier meal in the evening. And that's how I feel great. I would say on average, the minimum for a female might be somewhere around about 80 to 150 grams of carbs minimum per day. So 80 is quite low. You can kind of almost fill that up with your 500 grams of fruits and vegetables, basically. If you're an active woman, I would say somewhere between 150 or 300 grams of carbs. Even if you are doing a highly glycolytic sport or endurance sport, you might even benefit from more than that. And if we're getting into the higher ranges, you're probably looking at including more and more of the simple carbs in order to help your digestion. Because imagine 400 grams of carbs, mostly from things like potatoes and squash and like really high fiber things or more of the non-starchy vegetables, you're going to be so bloated and your body is going to be so draining your body with energy by just focusing on digestion. In terms of the fiber that I mentioned earlier or the vegetables, the guideline was kind of like aiming for 500 grams of vegetables and fruit. In terms of fiber, if you're looking for a number, I would say somewhere between 10 to 15 grams per 1,000 calories consumed. And I think the individualization is quite important. Sometimes numbers are thrown around like 20 to 30 grams for women and 30 to 40 grams for men. But we need to consider that it really depends on, your height, how much you're actually eating. If a female is eating 2,500 calories and she's aiming for 20 grams of fiber, that's going to be very different than a female aiming for 1,250 calories. Half of that, she's going to struggle a lot more getting that fiber in, and more than that to actually like push it out because she has less food volume going in than the person with double the amount of food. So I think just personalizing it a little bit more might be quite helpful. So I would say fiber and vegetables overall, I recommend for most people to include them into their food. I want to share one more small client story with you. I've worked with a lady, and I think I've mentioned this before, but anyway, I've worked with a lady. She said she has gone to many specialists in terms of optimizing her digestion, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, why she was feeling bloated and gassy and so on. And I said, okay, well, I'm, no specialist in that area either, but, or I'm not a specialist, but would you be open to trying something? And she said, sure, why not? And so we actually put her on the carnivore diet. And she said she had never felt that great before. We did slowly work on, after like a couple of months, work on, and this was also the first time she actually dropped weight. Before that, she was already counting calories, and we gave her the same amount of calories, but from just meat and eggs essentially, and some ghee also. But we did slowly reintroduce things like oranges, like honey and that kind of stuff. But yeah, for some individuals, low or no carb diets might be the way to go. I don't think that we should be fear mongering vegetables. On the contrary, I think most people are doing themselves a disservice by excluding vegetables in particular, but also even carbs. It can help with your sleep. It can help curb cravings later on. It can help with a better food relationship. It can help with your cognitive and physical performance. And the last note I want to put in here is just in regards to sugar, because of course sugars are a carb, and sugars, yes, I do recommend limiting sugars. I don't specifically encourage or urge my clients to count the amount of sugar that they're having, also because most fitness trackers, they do include fruit sugar in there. But what I will say is like, hey, let's aim for 80-90% whole foods. Obviously, that excludes sugar. Sugar is not a whole food. Sugar is processed. And therefore, that only leaves a small amount of room for anything processed like sugar, like sugary things. And I do think if for many people also completely telling themselves you can never ever have anything that contains refined sugar is not healthy when it comes to their food relationship, and then can actually end in a binge later on because you're like restricting. I cannot have this. And then once you have access to it because it's your niece's birthday or whatever, you go to completely bonkers. So I believe if you're someone who's like, oh, from time to time, I actually do enjoy some ice cream. I do enjoy the candy cane or whatever over holiday, over Halloween. Why don't you practice working that into your food diary as well, into your calories? Because in essence, sugar is also just a form of carb. So once again, when I started tracking, I was like, all right, well, now I no longer feel the fear of fruit, but I'm still afraid of sugary things. But technically, when I enter this, that donut I was talking about earlier actually just has the same amount of calories as if I had a banana with some peanut butter. And like, noticing that is just that how your body actually processes this. Yes, it might not be the same amount of micronutrients. Yes, you might not feel as satiated, but it just takes away some of that. You cannot have that. And if you the listener here or watcher, if you're anything like me and you're a little bit of a rebel, and if someone tells you you cannot have that, you kind of want it more, I would highly encourage just working it in a small amount, ideally around your workouts, ideally just on occasion. It is the things that we do on a daily basis that matter the most. So on a daily basis, we should be consuming our 500 grams of vegetables and fruit. We should be getting our fiber in, our 10 to 15 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories consumed. Most women, most people on average are probably going to benefit from a minimum of 80 to 150 grams of carbs. If you're active, maybe more like 150 to 300. If you're a male, obviously even more if you have a higher calorie allowance. So that is my takeaway for you. I hope I provided some insights for you into the truth about vegetables and carbs. If you have any questions about this at all, please do let me know. I love your questions, and I would love to hear if you have any future requests for topics. Otherwise, I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching.